a job summit as we had in the past, or that kind of thing? Insurance, councils, local government, business?
Look, there's no doubt that the Minister for Climate Change, James Shaw, is very aware of these things, but he is coming from behind the eight ball. It's been left to languish for too long, and we're playing catch-up now. But from Council's point of view, this adaptation stuff, it impacts us first. We've got huge amounts of assets, the council-owned assets at risk, say, just from sea level rise, but we've also got the whole liability question around do we put this information, risk information on land information memoranda? Yeah. Does that put us at risk? If we don't put it on the memoranda, does that put us at risk later on? When,
damned if you do and damned if you don't.
Exactly. So those are the kinds of things that we need clarified in a framework so that we can go forward with confidence and do the things that we know we need to do without looking over our shoulder at potential litigation.
We hear you, Dave. Thank you very much. We better move on, but appreciate your time today, Dave Cole from Local Government New Zealand and, of course, the Mayor of Dunedin. In the minutes we've got left, leave the tanks for Red Square, says the retired Marine General, Anthony Zinni, who recently served in the Trump administration but is now critical of the military show that's going on display for the 4th of July celebrations in America. Happy American Independence Day, by the way, everybody. When the Independence Day dawns in America in a few hours, one of the big talking points will be Trump's pet parade, what he's calling his salute to America, as tanks roll down the streets of Washington, D.C. But there's concern that Trump is politicising the armed forces on a day that's been traditionally non-partisan. What do you think, panel? He's the president. He wants to show off his tanks and bombs. What's wrong with that?
Well, I think he's picked this up pretty much from Vladimir Putin. And also President Xi and the North Koreans.
And Bastille Day in France. That was what he liked.
Well, I think the better and bigger examples would include, for example, the huge parade, which I actually was at in 2015, that the Chinese put on to mark 70 years since the end of the Second World War. And boy, was that designed for not just international viewers, but for domestic consumption, to show how big and fabulous they are. And they unveiled a whole range of weaponry that hadn't been seen before. And I think that Donald Trump is looking at that playbook and just thinking that's going to shore up his core support. And he's always into the biggest and the bestest.
well, supposedly there's a story in the Washington Post this afternoon saying the organisers have one thing they have to get right and make sure that the audience is bigger than the inauguration.
Yeah, and I think actually one of the problems, we can put aside, I suppose some of the jokes about him always having to have the biggest and the best, but there is this danger, though, that on focusing on the hardware, he is going to take away from that genuine sense of pride that Americans have on July 4th about the people in uniform.
And Chris, there are special seats there for the donors. It feels a bit like a rally, not just a national day.
Oh, if there was ever any doubt in anybody's mind that this guy wasn't a, immature 5-year-old, then I hope that that's completely gone with this. I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's ridiculous. This is schoolyard stuff, isn't it?
Well, because they're his toys that he's bringing out to play in front of everybody?
Absolutely. He wants an international stage. He wants to show a position of power. He wants to be able to prove domestically and internationally that, we're the best and the greatest, and he wants to do that through an old Cold War tradition of, troll out your tanks and missiles. Ridiculous.
Gets in the way of the hot dogs and fireworks that we usually get on Independence Day. We are just about out of time. I was going to say, there must be some music coming any second now. All right, Claire Delore.
Nice talking to you, Tim.
Thank you so much. Chris Gallivan.
Thanks, Claire. Thanks, Tim.
That's the panel for today. Lisa Owen and Checkpoint is next. It's been a pleasure to spend the afternoon with you. Have a great night.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. On tonight's programme, dairy farmers vote yes to selling off Westland Milk, but it's left a sour taste for some who feel they had zero choice. We talk to the board chair who reckons it's a good day for the coast. This government says everyone's entitled to respect, dignity and compassion. Does that include beneficiaries queuing at 2 a.m. for food grants? We're there as the police show us how thousands of guns will be crushed as part of the buyback scheme. A Rotorua whānau pleads for the return of a custom-made ponamu stolen from their son's gravesite.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leata tēnei. A long-established West Coast dairy cooperative looks set to pass into Chinese hands. Farmer shareholders of Westland Milk products voted overwhelmingly in Greymouth today to sell to the Yili conglomerate, whose offer of $3.41 a share values the company at $588 million. Shareholder Graham Naylon says it was clear the sale would get the go-ahead because the company's poor milk payouts have been putting farmers under huge financial strain.
Pretty sad day. I'm a cooperative man, true and true, I suppose. Yeah, and it's just pretty sad to see the demise of, what's really a West Coast institution.
The sale still needs Overseas Investment Office approval. The Serious Fraud Office has decided not to pursue criminal charges against the former chief executive of the Waikato District Health Board. Nigel Murray racked up $218,000 in expenses during more than 3 years as the DHB's head. The State Services Commission found that more than half of his claims for travel and accommodation were unjustified, and the matter was referred to the Serious Fraud Office. It has now concluded that it's not in the public interest to commit the high level of resources required to prove criminal charges beyond reasonable doubt. The office's director, Julie Reid, says obtaining the necessary evidence would mean extensive investigations in Canada, where Dr Murray worked previously. The SFO says, however, that it agrees with the Commission's conclusions about Dr Murray's conduct. A new report has again raised concerns about the way beneficiaries are investigated for fraud. The report by Auckland University's Public Policy Institute and the Child Poverty Action Group calls for immediate changes to the way the welfare system defines relationships. Under the current rules, people claiming the sole parent benefit must not be in a relationship in the nature of marriage. The report says what that means is unclear, but if beneficiaries get it wrong, it can lead to accusations of fraud and potentially a criminal conviction. Ricardo Menendez March of Auckland Action Against Poverty says many investigations are unnecessary.
Sole parents are subjected to incredibly scrutinising questions about their sex life in order to determine whether they're in a relationship or not. This ends up resulting in thousands of investigations a year to determine whether a sole parent is in a relationship or not.
Ricardo Menendez March of Auckland Action Against Poverty. An expert on Māori art history is warning whoever stole a pounamu from a Rotorua cemetery to return it immediately. She says there can be serious consequences for stealing sacred taonga. Te Aniwa Hurihanganui reports.
Custom made for Curtis Jones, who died of cancer in 2015, the circle-shaped taonga was reported missing from Kauai Cemetery on Tuesday. As part of a plaque engraved with the words Aroha Pumo mo ake tonu atu, it had been nailed to a concrete slab. Ngārino Ellis of Auckland University says stealing pounamu can desecrate its tapu and make those involved sick. Curtis Jones's sister, Tareen Huiaro Jones, says the whānau are devastated and they're urging anyone with information to notify the police. Ko te aniwa, Hurihanganui, aho.
In southern Japan, more than 1 million people have been ordered to evacuate their homes as torrential rain continues to batter the area, raising the risk of floods and mudslides. All the residents of Kagoshima, Kirishima and Aira, 3 cities in southwestern Kyushu, have been asked to leave. One elderly woman died after a mudslide hit her Kagoshima home. Meteorologist Sayaka Muri says the rain has stopped for a moment, but the landslide risk remains.
The land is so saturated because of 1 meter of rainfall, so the threats of landslides will continue for the next couple of days or so, I think. The river levels are still high, so stay away from the rivers and stay in a safer place. That's the advice I can give.
Since Friday, some areas of Kyushu have had as much as 1,000 millimetres of rain, or more than double the usual volume for all of July. The second major section of the tunnel for Auckland's new City Rail link has been completed today. The 348-metre tunnel under the northern section of Albert Street is now connected to the first section under Commercial Bay. The City Rail link will eventually allow trains to loop in and out of downtown Auckland instead of coming and going through one main entrance. Work on the next tunnel at the southern end of Albert Street is due to begin later this year. A senior Wellington Road police officer says he was shocked by the number of drivers using their cell phones while caught in heavy traffic yesterday. The city's roads slowed to a standstill after a derailment stopped trains running for nearly 24 hours. The police say 75 drivers were caught on their phones during a 2-hour operation at the intersection of Taranaki and Buckle Streets, and 3 weren't wearing their seatbelts. Sergeant Lawrence Vautier says it's unbelievable that drivers were browsing social media and texting. He says using a cell phone while driving is a major distraction and not worth risking anyone's life for. It's 5:05. The All Blacks coach Steve Hansen has defended the selection of Crusaders winger Sevu Reece despite his appearance in court last year on an assault charge. One of 4 uncapped players selected for the All Blacks' first 2 matches of the Rugby Championship. Reece was last year discharged without conviction for assaulting his partner. Hansen says they feel he has been properly dealt with by the courts, and All Blacks management also spoke with the Crusaders before selecting Super Rugby's leading try scorer.
Everybody's giving him a massive tick, and then he's giving himself one on the track as well as off it at the moment. So whilst you have to take it into consideration, it's been dealt with. So we've moved on, and he's playing really good football. I don't think there's one New Zealander who wouldn't have put him in their team.
Steve Hansen. Meanwhile, Quade Cooper has failed in his bid to return to the Wallabies, with Michael Cheika recalling first 5 Christian Leali'ifano from the Rugby Championship. New Zealand expect fast bowler Lockie Ferguson to be fit for next Tuesday's likely Cricket World Cup semi-final. The Black Caps, who will almost certainly play Australia, will be desperate for the return of Ferguson, who sits second equal on the tournament wicket-taking list. He missed this morning's 119-run loss to England with a hamstring strain, but skipper Kane Williamson says he was left out as a precautionary move. That's the news.
Counting the cost of climate change.
There's a pile of work that needs to be done, and we need to get on with it because the legal risks and the physical risks are going to be quite ugly.
Examining the sale of Nazi memorabilia.
Where do you draw the line with certain things? I don't want to hurt anybody. I don't want to upset a vegan or anybody else. It's just a shop that deals in history.
And reviewing a Black Caps collapse.
We're thinking about our cricket and where we can improve, and without a doubt it's trying to take smarter options on some of these tougher surfaces.
A smart option. Morning Report with Susie Ferguson and Corin Dan, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, a new study finds teenagers spend 2/3 of their day sitting down. Do our schools need to shake things up? And after 10, author Lucy Mays was prompted to look at the pressures doctors are under when her own physician husband Richard was nearing burnout. Join me, Lynn Freeman, and for Catherine Ryan on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow for Northland to Waitomo, including Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taumaranui. Rain with heavy falls and possible downpours, easing to a few showers tonight, clearing tomorrow evening. Taranaki to Manawatu, including Taihape, Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. Periods of rain, heavy falls in Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Taihape, easing to showers tomorrow. Snow lowering to 700 metres in Hawke's Bay and Central Plateau overnight, affecting high-level roads. Horowhenua to Wellington and Wairarapa, occasional showers. Nelson, Buller and Westland fine, with high cloud in Nelson clearing tonight. Canterbury and Marlborough, showers developing this evening, then clearing from inland Canterbury later tomorrow. For Southland, Otago and Fiordland, fine spells and a few showers, mainly about the south coast. Becoming fine north of Dunedin tomorrow. Chatham Islands, periods of rain developing from the afternoon with heavy falls tomorrow morning. You're with RNZ National. It's coming up to 9 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Susanna. Before you go, traffic on a scale of 1 to 10 getting to work today, 10 being very bad. How was it?
It was 10.
Right, OK. We've got a warning for all you out there who are listening in Auckland. Heavy rain and strong wind has slammed the city today, wreaking havoc on the roads. So the right northbound lane on the northern motorway has just reopened after it was blocked by flooding, and motorists are being advised to expect delays. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news. And some motorists are reporting it's taken as long as 40 minutes to drive up Hobson Street. So good luck out there if you are in Auckland. If you're listening, we're Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Dairy farmers have overwhelmingly voted to sell their 150-year-old dairy cooperative Westland Milk products to a Chinese company. After years of low payouts and mounting debt, the board put the country's second largest producer up for sale and recommended farmer shareholders accept a $588 million offer from yearly conglomerate. It's a bit of a tough one to get your mouth around. But despite signing off on the deal, many of the 350 shareholders have been left with a sour taste in their mouths. Maya Burry filed this report from Greymouth.
The reality is, if we don't sell, there won't be a dairy industry on the West Coast. And why? Because the bloody company's bankrupt.
This is the best thing we've got to sell. How come?
That is bankrupt, man. Do you know what it means? Bankrupt means?
That's crazy.
Yeah, see, because you don't know.
West Coast dairy farmer and former director of the cooperative, Jim Wafflebaker, didn't take kindly to two protesters doorstopping today's shareholder meeting. While the company isn't bankrupt, as Jim describes it, it is hundreds of millions of dollars in debt and has struggled to pay farmers a competitive price for their milk for several years. Mr Wafflebaker says he would not have been amongst the 94% of shareholders that backed selling up if the situation wasn't desperate.
I certainly would not have, but because I love the cooperative. I mean, I've been a director on this company for 25 years, you see. So I always fought for this company and was always loyal to the company, but for various reasons it went the wrong way. And now it's just a matter of survival on the West Coast for the dairy industry.
The sale isn't done and dusted yet. It still needs approval from the Overseas Investment Office, but the company's board has indicated it doesn't expect that to be a problem. Westland Milk shareholder Tom Taft says it's a shame farmers weren't presented with any other options to vote on, such as retaining partial ownership.
We had an option B and C. It might have been different thoughts, but you'd never know.
Where do you think things went wrong?
They knew they were in trouble, so why did they carry on doing what they were doing?
Another dairy farmer, Graham Naylon, voted against the proposal. He says he did so in protest.
Very sad, actually. Yeah, I'll probably have a tear when I get home. I'm a cooperative man, true and true, I suppose. Yeah, and it's just pretty sad to see the demise of, what's really a West Coast institution. Yeah.
The proposed sale is worrying some West Coasters, including the Grey District's mayor, who fears jobs at one of the area's biggest employers could slowly slip away from the region. West Coast local Kathleen Potter, who was protesting outside the meeting this morning, shares this concern.
Well, I think we should be trying to keep ownership in New Zealand of our important infrastructure and our food production facilities. I don't see why we should be selling them to a foreign government. I think they're really struggling financially, but I don't think this is going to help them long term. I think it's a short-term solution, but long term they're going to regret it.
The company's chair, Pete Morrison, says it's not privy to Yili's long-term plans, but they have been told by the Chinese group it will be business as usual until they get their feet under the desk. Mr Morrison says Yili has capital to invest and he thinks they will create more jobs in time. He says while he understands some farmers were disappointed about losing the cooperative structure, the sale will ultimately give them greater financial security. If all goes well, Yili will take over the co-op by the start of next month. In Greymouth for Checkpoint, ko Maya Burry tēnei.
Now, Westland Milk chairman Pete Morrison says he takes full responsibility for events that forced the sale of the dairy co-op to a foreign investor.
It's been a very good day. 96% of our farmers voted and participated in this, and 94% of those voted in favour, which is a very good day for the West Coast.
Is it a good day?
Definitely. I mean, the cash injection for the West Coast. Between now and Christmas, there's an extra 75 million comes into the coast because of don't need retentions and their increased advance payout, plus the 341 a share. There hasn't been a capital injection on the coast, for a generation this good.
But a lot of farmers would have preferred that it didn't end this way. So how can this be a good result?
We tried as a cooperative to, have a competitive payout to maintain our milk supply. That wasn't going to be the case, so we had to come up with an alternative option, and that's what we've done, and this is a very good alternative option.
New Zealand First has said that this is an erosion of New Zealand control over our productive sector. Weren't you worried at all about that?
It's not an erosion of our productive sector. We've got a very good
control
milk payout because of it.
Control, Mr Morrison. He said they're saying control over our productive sector. And we have lost control of this company, haven't we?
No, our farmers are going to get a competitive milk payout. You know, we're getting $3.41 a share. We're going to get a competitive milk payout, which we haven't had for a number of years, for the next 10 years. No one left behind. This is good for the West Coast.
Yeah, so why haven't they had a competitive payout for a number of seasons? I mean, what went wrong?
You know, we've over. I don't want to litigate the past, but you know, we've invested too much money and too much debt, and they haven't returned on those assets that have been built.
So what responsibility do you and other board members and senior management take for the fact that this co-op is having to be sold?
Look, I said right from the beginning when I stood for the board that you know, I wanted to be part of a very competitive co-op that had a good payout and that farmers did well. But if it couldn't do that, then we'd need a different ownership model, and that's what we've done. And you know, $3.41 a share, everyone's milk picked up, no one left behind. That is a great outcome for the coast and the greater community of the coast.
That doesn't answer my question. I asked you what responsibility do you take and other board members take for the fact that you are in this position where you have to sell, because a lot of farmers were concerned and remain concerned that there were promises of a value-added strategy, money was spent and you came up really short on delivery. So I ask again, what responsibility do you take for the fact this sale is having to be made?
Oh, look, 100%. You know, we're disappointed, the same as everyone, that we haven't been able to deliver, and you know, we take full responsibility for that as a team.
So, did it really have to end this way? Why not a partial sale?
Look, the best we went through a competitive process where we had 25 people engaged, where we could have had partial sale, or we could have a merger, or we could have had a takeover like we've got. And I think that when we've gone through that process and evaluated all those things, this was the best outcome for everybody. And our shareholders today have voted 94% in favour of that, which is, you know, it's incredible support for the board, and we should be proud of that.
Is that support for the board, or is it just recognition that this is a pragmatic way out of a bad situation? How can you tell?
Look, I think it would have been a far worse situation if we told the farmers that we were going to have a low payout for a number of years, large retentions, and we didn't have a different option. We've come back with an option. The option means that they can keep farming, and we've, you know, a lot of our farmers, because of our non-competitive payout for a number of years, could not sustain a low payout again, and would have been sold up. So, you know, this is a very good outcome for our farmers.
What you've painted there is a dead-end street with no other options, and they were provided with one option, weren't they? This is it.
And that is the job of the board. We went through a competitive process, and the process, you know, was very competitive, and we needed an outcome for the farmers so they could keep owning their farms and keep farming, and the families that have been part of it from the beginning would still be here, and this has done that, so it's great.
So what guarantees do they have? Because this guarantee is only for 10 seasons, isn't it? What happens then?
Look, yearly want our milk. I mean, you know, globally they're huge. They've got route to market, which we haven't got. They bring a whole lot of other things. So, look, I don't see it's changing. You don't see differentiated milk prices in New Zealand, and I don't think they'll try and bring that in.
But there are no guarantees, are there? After that period of time passes, that's it.
Look, there's 10 years in New Zealand agriculture, the way it's changing at the moment, is a long period of time. It's the longest that I know of that anyone's ever done a commitment for a milk supply. So that's a very positive outcome for us.
Tell me, what about the farmer shareholders who exited last year and say that they are still owed $11 million? Are they going to get paid, and when?
The Westland board, when those farmers left Westland Milk Products, they knew the terms they were leaving. They knew they were getting paid in 5 years' time. They're no longer shareholders of the company. That yearly have bought the assets and liabilities of the company, and they will pay them when they're due in the full due. And I think that's normal commercial business. And these guys are big operators, and and they understand commercial reality, and I think that's fine that they get paid out at the end of the term.
Well, the criticism which you'll be aware of is that basically a Chinese company is buying a New Zealand asset on the back of what they would characterise as an interest-free loan, i.e. their money that's still in the co-op that they haven't been paid. Is that a fair criticism?
I don't think so at all. I mean, they've bought the assets and liabilities as they stand of Westland Milk products in their entirety, and they are committed to pay those liabilities when they fall due. That's just commercial business.
So they're not going to be paid for potentially, until 2023?
I think that's the latest of them. But look, when they left the co-op, they agreed they would get their capital back at the end of 5 years. I mean, nothing has changed.
And that's Westland Milk Chairman Pete Morrison. It is just about 21 minutes past 5. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Let us know what you think about the sale of Westland Milk. Is it a short-term solution that will be regretted in the long run, or is it a good day on the coast? We're interested to hear what you say on that. Text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or send us an email, and you can do that at checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Claims tonight that families are being forced to endure inhumane conditions, queuing for emergency grants to feed and clothe their families. Parents lined up in the early hours of the morning outside a South Auckland Work and Income office to meet with advocates who help them with their claims. Without them, they say their desperate pleas for cash are almost always denied. Now, those helpers are calling on the Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, to come and see the situation for herself. Our cameraman, Nick Munro, and reporter Nita Blake-Person filed this report.
It's pitch black when we pull up outside Manurewa's Work and Income office just after 6:30 this morning. The rain is torrential and has been for hours, but already a queue of about 30 people is huddled against the building, trying to shelter as best they can. Some of them have been here for much of the night, desperate to be seen first and get help as soon as possible.
About 2 o'clock this morning.
Why so early?
I have to come early because I need get some clothes for my kids. Last time I went to see them, they gave me $200 for the 3 kids. So it wasn't enough. I need some long pants, jumpers, jerseys and that. And then I need to get food. Because I stay in a 3-bedroom house, I'm paying $610 a week.
So what time did you get here this morning?
4:30, and I got here at 5.
And where did you both come from?
I come from Papakura. Pukekohe.
And what are you here for today?
Food and winter stuff. Yeah, pretty much it. Same food, winter clothing, blankets. As all my money's going on rent, everything else, I'm surviving on $23 a week.
I mean, I'm working about 20 hours a week on top of the benefit, and it's just not. I mean, that comes a lot down to the rent market too, because it's just so high here. I mean, I'm paying $500 a week for a 3-bedroom that's pretty much. It's almost like it's just like 1 bedroom with 3 little rooms that have come off that 1 bedroom. It's ridiculous, the price for rent out here.
And you've been here since what time?
6 o'clock. And I'm here with my baby and my little baby in the car. He's only 1 year old, and we need help because right now I'm looking for a job.
What do you need from them?
Well, being on couples benefit, we don't really get much. Sometimes we get 280 or 300, and my babies, they both drink formula because he's only 2 and another one is 1. And there are other things that we need help, like medical, because we have to pay bills for them. We have appointment for them. They've been sick for a couple of weeks, and we got appointment for them today to go to doctor, so we need help with that as well.
People have come from all over Auckland to be here because Thursdays are the only day they can meet with Work and Income alongside representatives from Auckland Action Against Poverty, or AAAP as it's known. Their advocates help people apply for the appropriate emergency grants, and as the morning goes on, the line gets longer and longer.
Morena. Oh, you fellas, 4 years sitting in the rain.
When AAAP's Kathleen Paraha arrives around 7:30, there are about 70 people waiting.
The low-income earners are really suffering, really bad. See, now they've got kids out here now, and it's pouring with rain. So I've got to try and go and get another umbrella to cover their kid in a minute.
She says everyone in line is struggling.
Oh, it's because it's the only time they can get anything. When AAAP isn't here, they get a decline, like food grants, simple things that that's essential. Winter clothing for kids, they get turned away all the time. They're not neglecting their children, but one seems to think if you can't afford your food, you're neglecting your children. That's rubbish. Yeah, they just can't afford it. The rent is too high.
AAAP staff hand out forms which allow an appointment with an advocate and wins to the first 65 people in line.
We process them, they go through and get an appointment, and then we help them out in the other end.
Just before 8:30, the first people are let in. Only a few are allowed in at a time. The rest are left waiting outside in the rain for their turn. It makes for a very long wait to get the grants they're so desperate for.
Since about 3 o'clock in the morning. So 3:30 was the first start off. I had the kids in the van. Hopefully it all works out in the end. About 9:30 is my appointment.
Yeah, pretty much get here at 4:30. The doors usually are open around 8:15, 8:30, then they hand out the folders. We got to go in and fill them out, talk with the advocate to see what we are wanting, because they only prioritise the necessary stuff first. And then they hand out their time slots, and I made the 11 o'clock one because everybody else got the earlier ones. I know a few people that come there, make quite good money, and they just come and stand in line because it's a free $200 for food that you don't have to spend out of your own money. I mean, to me that's a little bit, I don't really agree with that, because I know that there's hard up people that actually need food, and they're having to stand at the back of the line and wait till 4 o'clock appointments to get their first feed of the day for people that are just coming in thinking it's fun to get free stuff. You got to do what you got to do, I guess, to get food and stuff for your kids. So getting sick doesn't really come into mind when you have to feed your children. So
we came at 6 o'clock and we just got seen now at 9 o'clock, I think, but nearly 9 o'clock. So yeah, that's very long wait for my babies. He probably gonna get sick by the time we get home. And wait is not finished yet. After appointment, we still have to do our things all day, and yeah, then get to go home. Basically, $170 goes out for 2 babies, and what we left with is $120. $50 goes out for power, and $60, $70 is not enough for me and my partner for food, so they need to really consider it.
I had to walk half an hour to get here, basically, because Clinton's shut down. I'll be coming here every week because, yeah, I don't make much of a benefit, basically. I can't get a job, I'm on a medical, been in a car accident, and it's still hard to get things. I'm a single father, trying to get somewhere in life, and I'm always worrying about my old lady, my father, well, food ain't cheap. I've got a daughter, they need their personal stuff. Kids going to school with no food. It's not just the mother and father's fault. It's just, we never had their perfect life that others had. Some of us are here to use the system and some of us are not. And we're getting judged the same way they are.
Kathleen Paraha works hard to get people seen as quickly as possible.
They've been here since 2 o'clock this morning. It's not humane, to leave them out in the rain like this, especially kids. They're begging for help, and it's not their fault. The government should be more understanding where they're concerned,
Now she's challenging the Prime Minister to come and see the situation herself to get an idea of what they're up against.
So the government needs to get off their butts and come down and have a look for themselves so they can realise what's going on. Not just say, come in and see us and we can sort it out. Rubbish, because we've got people going in every day.
Any messages for Jacinda?
Yeah, come down and see for yourself. Come see the reality of things down here, because it is really, really bad.
And we have received this statement from Work and Income's Regional Commissioner Mark Goldsmith on that story. We are really concerned, he says, about what is happening at our Manurewa office on Thursdays. Impact Days, organised by Auckland Action Against Poverty, create an on-the-day high level of demand not experienced by any of our other offices. We have to manage the safety and security of our clients and our staff, so we restrict the number of people we have in our office. We have made numerous attempts to work more closely with AAAP so people do not have to wait so long, but they have refused. If you'd like to check out that story, see the pictures, Nita and Nick's story, it'll go online and will be on our Facebook page as well. You can have a look at the queues that she's talking about there. The Transport Agency is urging motorists to avoid the Auckland CBD if they can tonight. Just a warning about traffic here if you are in Auckland. Traffic has snarled up after a major intersection was reduced to one lane when a large panel fell off a building on the corner of Nelson and Victoria Street. Heavy rain has also been a problem, and after flooding twice on two separate occasions this afternoon, all northbound lanes on the northern motorway have reopened. But drivers are telling us there are long delays and some bus routes have been diverted. Drivers are also reporting that Hobson Street is gridlocked from the top of Quay Street along with Fanshawe Street and Queen Street to the Harbour Bridge, which pretty much means that most of central Auckland is gridlocked. Avoid it if you can. And Susanna with the headlines.
A long-established West Coast dairy cooperative looks set to pass into Chinese hands, with shareholders of Westland Milk Products voting overwhelmingly to sell it to Yili conglomerate. Shareholder Graham Naylon says it was clear the sale would get the go-ahead because the company's poor milk payouts have been putting farmers under huge financial strain. The sale still needs Overseas Investment Office approval. The Serious Fraud Office has decided not to pursue criminal charges against the former chief executive of the Waikato District Health Board because of the high costs involved. Nigel Murray racked up $218,000 in expenses during more than 3 years as the DHB's head. The State Services Commission found that more than half of his claims for travel and accommodation were unjustified. The SFO says it agrees with the Commission's conclusions about Dr Murray's conduct. It's been a wet, cold and windy day for much of the country, and that's set to continue overnight in some areas. Heavy rain warnings have been issued for Rotorua, the Gisborne Ranges, Hawke's Bay and Taupō. Snow warnings are in place for the Napier-Taupō Road, the Desert Road and Lindis Pass. A new report has again raised concerns about the way beneficiaries are investigated for fraud. The report by Auckland University's Public Policy Institute and Child Poverty Action Group calls for immediate changes to the way the welfare system defines relationships. It says some definitions are unclear, but if beneficiaries get it wrong, it can lead to accusations of fraud and potentially a criminal conviction. In southern Japan, more than 1 million people have been ordered to evacuate their homes as torrential rain continues to batter the area, raising the risk of floods and mudslides. One elderly woman died after a mudslide hit her Kagoshima home. Those are our latest headlines on RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. It's time for business now with Giles Beckford, who should be standing by in our Wellington office. Come in, Giles. There you are. Hey, we've heard about the sale of Westland Dairy. It's not the first agricultural co-op to strike trouble in recent years. Is the co-op structure still relevant, do you think?
Well, that was a very good question that I raised, certainly has been raised by the Westland sale and the excellent package that came from Maya Murray on the West Coast highlighted the issues that beset Westland. And there's a natural tension in there. We've seen it in Silver Fern Farms as one example in the meat industry. We've seen it in Fonterra itself in years gone by. It's how do you maximise the returns to the shareholders, the suppliers who own the business, while you generate enough income and profits to keep some aside for the future. And that's where the rub comes. Westland didn't seem to get that right. The fingers pointed at management and the board for decisions that they've made in years gone past. I asked Craig Presland, who is the head of the New Zealand Co-op Association, which represent cooperative-style businesses in this country. He says it most certainly is relevant, and you might be a little bit surprised, but some of the bigger co-ops that operate in this country might attend. Pack and Save and New World supermarkets under the carpet, under the fabric of the foodstuffs, livestock improvement, Co-op Bank, SBS Bank. So some big size businesses there. Overall, they're worth about $45 to $50 billion worth of revenue a year, make up nearly a fifth of the economy. They are employing somewhere in the region of 50 to 60,000 people. So not an inconsiderable part of the economy, and certainly a structure that does matter. It does work. A point made by Mr. Preston to me is that, of course, these are people who have skin in the game, who own their businesses. They are committed to actually keeping their businesses in New Zealand, keeping the profits in this country, and quite often they take a long-term intergenerational point of view as well. All things that seem to have been lost slightly in the Westland Milk debate.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know that some of those big names that you've just mentioned there were co-ops. Let's move on to questions around water company ownership. This is posing an interesting conundrum, isn't it?
Well, it is certainly, I suppose, given Auckland's weather today, it's very relevant. But the Productivity Commission, which is one of these quangos, as they call it, an advisory body of government. It looks at a particular sector of the economy. It comes up with some ideas for the future on them. This one is about local body financing, and it's singled in on a couple of issues. One is the need for local bodies and authorities to be able to raise more money. One of its suggestions is bed taxes, and we all know how vexed that can be in some areas, and certainly parts of the tourism industry don't like the prospect of it. But also water management. Who owns the water? How should it be managed? Now, most water in this country, of course, is managed by local bodies, and they, by and large, it's just part of your rates bill. But the Productivity Commission is suggesting that there is a need to study whether, in fact, water management should be privatised or part privatised, sold down. Now, I know this is an issue that's popped up in the Auckland mayoral race, with John Tamahere advocating such a thing. Phil Goff in the past 24 hours or so coming out strongly against it. But there's no doubt that local authorities who might get a bit strapped for cash, especially when they need to upgrade their infrastructure and climate change related projects in the years to come, might well be tempted to look at privatising or partly privatising their water management businesses. And from that point of view, the Productivity Commission document will provide some interesting reading. They're looking for feedback, and I'd encourage people to actually have a bit of a squiz through it and put some words and thoughts on paper. It will then put forward a final report which will go to the government. Possibly it may even be translated through into policy. We'll wait and see, although we have to say that the track record for Productivity Commission reports isn't that great.
And Giles, you've got some numbers for us, as always.
What else would we have but a record close for the local share market? Up a modest 14 points, 10,558, just to boggle you. The market has gained 21% or thereabouts so far this year. Of course, one could say, is it going to go higher? We'll just wait and see. But what goes up inevitably comes down in one shape or another. On the currency front, Kiwi trading at 67 US cents, 95.3 Aussie and 53.3 British pence.
Thanks, Giles. Good to talk to you. That's Giles Beckford, our business editor, with your business wrap for the day. Tens of thousands of firearms will be crunched by a hydraulic press after gun owners hand them into police at collection events that begin next week. Almost 1,000 guns have already been handed in, and another 8,000 have been flagged for surrender through the online registration process. That's a good start, but over the next 6 months, they're expecting tens of thousands to be handed in and destroyed under the scheme introduced in the wake of the Christchurch mosque attacks. Police reporter Ben Strang and cameraman Dom Thomas went along to Upper Hutt today, where the police demonstrated the process that gun owners will go through.
The sound of gun barrels being crushed will reverberate around collection venues until the end of the gun amnesty on the 20th of December. It's one of the final stages of the gun buyback process, rendering a firearm useless before it's shipped away to be melted down or disposed of. The police have purchased a number of hydraulic presses from a family engineering business in Christchurch to do that job, demonstrated today at a mock version of the process at Trentham Racecourse near Wellington. Senior Sergeant Braden Lenehan lays out what gun owners will experience when they attend a collection event.
So before we go any further, the first thing that will happen is we'll come to the safe zone. In the safe zone, there are a number of bullet traps, firearms, chamber flags, and the first member that they will meet asks them if they've cleared their firearm, assists them to clear their firearm, and make sure that the firearm is safe and clear so that everybody is safe on the site when they arrive through and carry on through the event.
From there, the gun owner will be directed to the buyback counter, where they'll sort out the financial details, or to the amnesty desk for people who aren't eligible for compensation. For those who haven't completed the online form detailing their guns, they'll be asked to do that first. Handing a gun in under the amnesty will be seamless, but if you're seeking compensation, things will take a little longer. The gun owner will need to agree on the condition of the gun, as Senior Sergeant Paddy Hannon demonstrated as he took on the role of a generic gun owner.
So how would you rate the condition of your firearm?
Oh, it's about 20 years old, so it's certainly been used.
Fairly used? Absolutely. Just taking a look at it, sir, I would absolutely put that in the used category.
With that done, the gun knows its fate. The hydraulic press awaits. Deputy Commissioner Mike Clement says 15 people are employed to run collection events in each of the 12 police districts. 108 people have been hired as short-term contractors, and the rest are existing police staff. Mr Clement says the police have no idea how busy they'll be during the first few months of collections.
Well, in actual fact, what you've seen here today is a team of 9 plus the security, so a team of 15 I've talked about in each of the 12 districts. For Canterbury on the first occasion on that Saturday the 13th, we will have 2 teams in location. So we've got a surge capability, but the reality is we don't know. We've said all the way through we don't really know how many people are going to turn up on that day and other days. No one can know, and so all we're doing is making sure that we are agile enough to meet the demand, and if we're not, we'll change it up to make sure that we are.
The Police Minister, Stuart Nash, was impressed with what he saw at Trentham Racecourse and says he expects the collection events to be a success. That's despite not knowing how many people are expected to turn out.
Well, as the Deputy Commissioner said, the police have the ability to surge. So if we find the demand is a lot greater than the officers on duty, then more will come in. And obviously the first one at Riccarton is a bit of a test. Again, as the Deputy Commissioner has outlined, if in fact it's taking longer than the police expect, then they will make sure that the resources are at the next one. And I have complete confidence in the police to do a fantastic job, as they have done, in putting the whole process together.
The first of the gun collection events is set for Riccarton Racecourse next weekend, running from 10 until 3. Nearly 300 further events are planned for the first 3 months of the collection scheme, with more to be added for later in the year. For Checkpoint, Ben Strang.
Let's go to cricket now. Ultimately, it could all come down to luck. The Black Caps are all but assured of a semi-final spot at the Cricket World Cup in England, despite being thrashed by the hosts in Durham this morning. New Zealand now sits 4th on the tournament table, setting them up for a semi-final against Australia in Manchester on Tuesday. Now, let's walk through this next bit slowly. While there is no clear margin due to the complexities of net run rate, Pakistan could yet sneak into the semis, but only if they were to bat first in their final pool against Bangladesh and then win by a margin of more than 300. Are you keeping up? So, working on the theory that the Black Caps will be in Manchester for the semi-finals, what are their chances of repeating their 2015 efforts and reaching the final? Sports editor Stephen Hewson reports.
Momentum's talked about a lot when it comes to World Cup tournaments in any sport. And after 3 straight losses to Pakistan, Australia and now England at the Cricket World Cup, momentum is certainly not in the Black Caps' favour. New Zealand sorely missed fast bowler Lockie Ferguson in his 150 km/h deliveries as they lost by 119 runs to England in Durham this morning. Ferguson is the second highest wicket taker at the tournament, sitting on 17, with only Australia's Mitchell Starc on 24 ahead of him. Chasing 306 to win after England won the toss and chose to bat, New Zealand's batting faltered again to be all out for just 186. Skipper Kane Williamson says he wasn't blaming their loss on losing the toss, but concedes it played a part.
They did get the best of the conditions, but they were also the better team, so they outplayed us in all facets, and they deserved the win without a doubt, and the conditions didn't, I guess, decide the result. But at the same time, I think the conditions changed a lot after perhaps the first 20 overs of their batting, and it did slow down a lot.
come Tuesday night's likely semi-final against Australia, former Black Cap Ian O'Brien worries the toss could ultimately decide the match.
Since about the halfway stage, only 3 teams have won, having lost the toss. So that's 3 of 19, I think it was. So lose the toss, and only 3 of 19 win the actual game. So we are seeing a real second half of the tournament dominated by the coin.
Despite having now suffered 3 straight losses at the tournament, Black Cap skipper Kane Williamson remains upbeat that they can topple Australia come Tuesday.
Certainly on the day, anything can happen, and we know from our perspective that we haven't put out our best performance yet, and we know when we do, that without a doubt gives us the best chance of beating anybody. So if we're fortunate to be in a semi-final, we need guys to have that freshness to go out and play with the freedom that we know when we do, that does allow us to play our best cricket.
Kane Williamson's also confident the fast bowler Lockie Ferguson will be back for the match. Ferguson quelled the threat of Australian batsmen David Warner and Steve Smith when New Zealand played Australia in pool play, and his return will certainly be a boost for the Black Caps.
He's been outstanding throughout this whole tournament and a real point of difference for us in terms of coming in and bowling at 150. Did we miss him? Yes, he's been so successful in the last 8 games, but potentially would miss him more if we didn't have him, hopefully in another game's time. So he should be fine. It's a fairly minor injury, so he should be okay.
So Tuesday night semi-final in Manchester shapes as a repeat of the 2015 final in Melbourne, New Zealand against Australia. That's assuming India beats Sri Lanka and Australia beat South Africa in their final pool games. Should India win and Australia lose, that would leave the Black Caps playing India on Tuesday and England and Australia scoring off in the other semi in Birmingham on Thursday night. Got all that? Clear as mud? Well, what is clear anyway is that the winners of the semi-finals will then meet in the final at Lord's a week on Sunday night. For Checkpoint, Stephen Hewson.
Yep, that was a bit of a mind meld for me. It is about 14 minutes away from 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm getting a bit of feedback from you on the sale of Westland Milk, the vote that went through today. The farmers have decided to sell it. Jeremy says, kia ora, what a scandal with Westland Milk. Having run it into the ground, spent megabucks on consultants and lawyers with a view to sale. The board and the senior executives stand to get substantial payouts when the sale goes through, and they say they take full responsibility. Chris says we must stop selling primary assets to overseas companies. Lease the ground, yes. Sale of infrastructure like the co-op, no. Followed by 3 exclamation marks, I should note. It's takeover by stealth. Next thing, land gets sold and new labour force sweeps through. There must be another option than what was presented today, says Chris. Simon's also been in touch. West Coast dairy farmers have 10 years of guaranteed milk solid prices. What happens after that? I see the price will drop again and farmers will be forced to sell. Then foreign owners will move in with glee, says Simon. Let us know what you think. 2101 on the text. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can type us out a wee email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. The husband of a woman who died from multiple brain aneurysms is urging the Southern DHB to give immediate attention to the shortage of neurosurgeons in Dunedin. It took more than 12 hours for Balclutha mother of 2, Anna Milne, to get from her home to Christchurch Hospital after a multitude of delays before she was flown north. Dunedin Hospital is serviced by 1 neurosurgeon at present and relies on Christchurch to provide cover when he's not on duty, such as on Queen's birthday weekend when Mrs Milne fell ill. She was admitted to Dunedin Hospital with severe headaches on the Saturday, but after being discharged on Sunday, suffered a stroke the following day. Her husband Johnny Milne spoke to our Otago Southland reporter Timothy Brown.
Anna had a stroke at home for a start, symptoms of a stroke when I walked in and saw her. She recovered quite well when the ambulance got there. So her face lifted back up, and so when I got to Dunedin, I told them that she'd had the stroke and that's when they requested a scan straight away. There was a nurse there who had seen Anna on the Saturday night before and said, look, we need a scan straight away. They said it would take 1 to 2 hours, but it ended up taking virtually between probably 5 and 6 hours, which is, I don't know, that shouldn't happen. I don't think when you're requesting scans and stuff, on the head.
So was an explanation given for why it took so long to get a scan?
No. They just said that people had to be called in, so no explanation at all. No. We were just waiting, and And I'm not sort of really someone that to get too angry or shitty about it, but they kept coming back saying, it shouldn't be too far away. So, I mean, that was in the ED unit, so they had plenty going on too. So it just took a long time, I reckon. I mean, when we got to Christchurch Hospital, when Nana was taken in there, we went into the ED unit there, and she got scanned within about 10 or 15 minutes. So I don't know if they had people there, other people they were scanning before Anna, or what the go was. I'm not sure, but yeah, they said it would take 1 to 2 hours, and it took virtually 5 to 6.
And what was your impression of staffing in Dunedin Hospital? Did they seem stretched?
Yeah, they definitely. I would say that. Yeah, I felt sorry for them, to be fair.
And the difference between Dunedin Hospital and Christchurch Hospital was quite notable.
Yeah, I couldn't, because we only spent because we were taken from the plane to Christchurch Hospital, and we went straight into the ED unit, which because she had another a bleed on the way up in the plane, so things got pretty bloody serious on the plane. She was talking before we got on the plane to me. She was still conscious in that, and then on the way up things, I think her blood pressure went sky high or something, and she ended up having another bleed, and she was unconscious. So when we got to Christchurch, I couldn't really compare the two, because it was probably very critical what was happening when they were virtually just trying to probably keep her alive. You're not affixing blame to anyone here, you just want to make sure... No, not at all. Anna probably wouldn't have survived an operation anyway with what was going on. So I'm not pointing the blame at anybody at all. It's purely just the time it took, and it's to help someone else further down the track. That's the reason.
And that's Johnny Milne speaking to our Otago Southland reporter Timothy Brown about the delays in treatment which preceded his wife's death last month. Southern DHB's Chief Medical Officer, Dr Nigel Miller, says Mrs Milne's death is a tragedy and the circumstances surrounding her care are being investigated. He says while the DHB understands there are concerns that on occasions patients with neurosurgical conditions need to be transferred to Christchurch when a neurosurgeon is not available, there are protocols in place to ensure that the process is timely and appropriate. A locum neurosurgeon is starting in Dunedin at the end of July for a 6-month period, and arrangements for another locum to start in October are being made. The United Nations says an airstrike that killed at least 44 people in Libya, a Libya prison camp for African migrants, could constitute a war crime. At least 130 people were injured in the attack in Tripoli, which the Libyan government has blamed on an airstrike by forces loyal to a warlord, General Khalifa Haftar. But he says the government is to blame. It's the worst attack on civilians in Libya since the fall of its dictator, Muammar Gaddafi, in 2011. The BBC's Quentin Somerville reports.
A direct hit brought down most of the hangar housing the migrants. In daylight, amid the rubble, were body parts, torn clothing and a large crater. The dead were mostly African migrants who were trying to get to Europe. Some had been held in the detention centre for more than a year. Hussein bin Atiyah is the mayor of Tajura in the east of Tripoli, where the detention centre is located.
I was there. I saw... In that bloody night, I saw all the bodies thrown everywhere, hands, heads, blood, children, women, men. They actually killed by this bomb.
They were caught in the crossfire of Libya's latest civil war. The government in Tripoli blamed the forces of Khalifa Haftar, a warlord with his own self-styled Libyan National Army. The LNA had earlier threatened an escalation in airstrikes, but it denies it was to blame for the bombing. The UN says it's unclear who is responsible, but again called on better protection for migrants in Libya and an end to the policy backed by Europe, which sees migrants attempting to cross the Mediterranean return to Libyan shores.
Quentin Somerville reporting. A new proposal could see councils hit motorists with a $40 fine for parking even part of their car on a berm. And that's even if there isn't a no parking sign nearby. Waitemata Local Board Chair Pippa Coombe wants councils around the country to lobby the government to ban parking on berms. Matthew Tunison reports.
Currently, it is technically illegal to park on berms, but because there aren't enough no parking signs, there are many places where it's not enforceable. So instead of spending tens of thousands of dollars erecting more signs, Pippa Coombe wants to ban berm parking outright, regardless of whether or not there are signs up. She'll be presenting the case to councils at the LGNZ conference on Sunday, in the hope they can form a unified front to lobby central government.
Berms are part of the footpath, and I think most people presume that you can't park on them anyway. So what we're looking for is just to clarify the rules so we don't have this anomaly that you need to have signage up to confirm that you can't park on the berm, because there's a lot of reasons not to park on the footpath.
The rules would have to be changed by the New Zealand Transport Agency. Ms Coombe says she doesn't want to crack down on drivers who park on berms, but for the rules to be in place in case there's a complaint and action needs to be taken.
What we want to discourage is people, as a matter of course, trying to find free parking where there is parking. They just have to pay for it, and they're looking for free parking and using the berms and damaging them because the rules are ambiguous.
The Automobile Association's principal advisor, Mark Stockdale, says if a new law is introduced, it would catch a lot of people out because berm parking is a common practice.
Whether that's in some suburban streets that are quite narrow and people try and get their cars off the road so they're not restricting traffic. And so a blanket ban would really fly in the face of what a lot of Kiwis do, and it's something that we think actually should be dealt with on a case-by-case basis.
He says if people are causing problems by parking on a particular berm, the council should just put a sign up. And Mr Stockdale says Kiwis are pretty fond of their berms and don't want it to be up to the council to say what is and isn't allowed on them.
In many cases, the property owners are maintaining that berm like it's part of their property, even though it isn't. They're maintaining it on behalf of the council. They're mowing the berm, and that kind of confers property rights, and that's why people do use those berms. So we have to think about how people behave, and sort of having a blanket ban, flies in the face of what people do.
It's not the first time berms have hit the headlines. In 2013, the Auckland Council sparked controversy when it moved to make residents mow their own berms rather than the council. After an outcry, it was forced to back down. It's not yet clear whether motorists will tell the councils to get off their grass this time if they go ahead. In Auckland for Checkpoint, call Matthew Tunison Tēnei.
I so want to know what you think of that. I bet you've done a cheeky park on the berm before. Text us 2101. Let's go to Air New Zealand now. Air New Zealand has been rubbished over its decision to stop stocking newspapers in its koru lounges, apparently in a bid to be more environmentally sustainable. But the airline is standing by the move, saying it's on a journey to reduce its carbon footprint. Harry Locke reports.
The world's least unsustainable airline. That's how British environmentalist Sir Jonathan Porritt described Air New Zealand last year. And it seems the airline is trying to live up to that slogan. Its latest move? To scrap newspaper subscriptions for koru lounges. Air New Zealand says the decision is part of its commitment to sustainability, but the newspapers aren't buying it. Sinead Boucher is the chief executive of Stuff, which publishes the Dominion Post, Press and Sunday Star Times newspapers.
We were surprised to see that New Zealand was citing sustainability grounds for stopping supplying newspapers in its lounges when our newspapers are very sustainable. They're made completely from waste products, and we take real pride and put a lot of efforts around making sure that they have as small a footprint as possible.
But AirNZ says it's more than just the biodegradability of the papers. In a written response to RNZ, the airline says removing all newspapers from aircraft cabins alone will cut more than 700,000 kilograms of weight from its aircraft per year, which will result in an estimated carbon saving of more than 2 million kilograms annually. It's also committed to getting rid of single-use plastic water and coffee cups by the end of October and has removed 4.5 million paper napkins each year from domestic flights. Environmental campaigner Wendy McGuinness from the McGuinness Institute says the airline deserves some credit.
I think it's a fantastic example because a lot of people have a lot of different opinions, but what it does do is make us have this discussion. I am up for any entity doing any steps in the direction to reduce our carbon footprint. I think Air New Zealand has got a lot of work to do, but at least it's a little step.
But Wendy McGuinness warns against greenwashing when businesses try to use token environmental efforts to cover their polluting ways.
We need companies to stand up and own their footprint. Some companies will try and use it because reputational risk is a really big issue. And so if they're just using it to manage their reputational risk, I think people will see that for that, and that will not go down well.
At a climate change workshop in central Wellington, involving over 40 young people from all over New Zealand, reaction to the decision was mixed.
I'm a huge advocate for it. I see just banning newspapers and reverting to technology as an empowering thing from a technology perspective.
I understand they want to make a difference, but what they're doing as a multi-millionaire airline, are they really doing more than that, or is it just that one issue? I'm a bit skeptical.
It's really small in terms of what they do. I guess it's kind of the nature of their business. So they make money from emissions. But I think it's a step in the right direction.
I think one word I would use to describe their sustainability is pathetic. Their profit is just unbelievable.
As the press mill keeps spinning, the Koru Lounge is no longer on the delivery list.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leata tēnei. A West Coast farmer says shareholders had no choice but agree to sell their struggling dairy cooperative. At a meeting in Greymouth today, Westland Milk Products' 350 farmer shareholders voted overwhelmingly to sell to China's Yili Group, whose offer of $3.41 a share values the company at $588 million. 96% of shareholders took part in the vote, and just under 94% of them backed the sale. Daryl Kennedy, who farms in the Grey District, says the company's commercial failures left farmers no other option but to sell their 150-year-old co-op.
It's sad, obviously, to lose the company, but it was unviable for everybody. So we had to, there was no options left, really. It was either sink with the company or sell it.
The sale still needs Overseas Investment Office approval. The Education Ministry is disappointed primary and intermediate school principals are refusing to work with it for the next 6 weeks. The boycott follows principals' rejection of the ministry's most recent pay offer. Our education correspondent John Gerritsen reports.
Members of the Educational Institute agreed to take the action because they want to pressure the government into making a better offer. From Monday next week until August the 16th, they'll refuse to supply information, read ministry documents or attend ministry meetings and working groups. The ministry says it values principals' work and it will talk to the NZEI to adjust its offer. But it says it won't change the total value of the package, which is $64 million over 3 years. Ko John Gerritsen tēnei.
Canterbury health officials are promising changes to tackle racism in the system. At a meeting today, District Health Board members responded to a Waitangi Tribunal report highlighting the Crown's failure to ensure Māori health outcomes are equitable. Māori have on average the poorest health status of any ethnic group in New Zealand. The DHB's Māori and Pacific Health Executive Director Hector Matthews says big changes are needed.
If you're a white middle class male, you do all right. If you're not, then you have to work a little bit harder, but you can still get through. I think it's just us owning that and saying, okay, so where can we make it better? If we make it better for younger children to access our services, for poorer populations, and we can do that in different ways, then our health system will improve.
Hector Matthews says acknowledging the system is biased is the first step. Regional tourism organisations have backed the idea of a bed tax to support councils facing mounting pressure from growing visitor numbers. In a review of local government funding, the Productivity Commission has found some councils are struggling to fund services and infrastructure, and it says a bed tax could help. The Executive Officer of Regional Tourism New Zealand, Charlie Ives, says he welcomes a visitor levy or bed tax, as do the organisation's roughly 30 members.
If we look at the size of the problem around the country, the biggest investor in tourism around New Zealand is local government, and they're under huge pressure in terms of providing infrastructure and support to the industry right around the country, not just in places like Queenstown. I think the problem is bigger than just who actually we should be collecting it from.
Charlie Ives says the additional funding would help councils pay for much needed infrastructure. A US federal judge has temporarily blocked the state of Ohio's so-called heartbeat bill banning abortions as early as 6 weeks into a pregnancy from going into effect. The BBC's Chris Buckler reports on Ohio's law, which had been scheduled to take effect next week.
It is one of a series of states, around a dozen in the US, that have put in place similar bills. And these bills essentially say that an abortion cannot be carried out once a fetal heartbeat can be detected. And this particular bill has been described and called the Heartbeat Protection Act. However, in this case, the district judge has said, as far as he's concerned, that is contrary to law that has been decided in the US Supreme Court. And as a result, he has decided to issue what is known as a preliminary injunction against it. So essentially it is blocked from this moment in time.
Chris Buckler reporting. A woman who stole $368,000 from Ports of Auckland with her lover has been jailed for 3 years. Litia Vuniduvu and Paul Bainbridge billed the company for contract work that was never done. Bainbridge, a former Ports of Auckland manager who oversaw millions of dollars in expenditure, has already been jailed for his part in the scheme. In April, a jury found Vuniduvu guilty of 50 charges of dishonestly using documents. In the North Shore District Court today, Judge Jonathan Down heard emotional expressions of remorse from her before passing sentence. Today's heavy rain won't alleviate water shortages in Auckland's Waitakere Dam. The city's water storage is a quarter less than normal for this time of year, but today's downpour won't have been enough to make a real difference. A Watercare spokesperson, Rosalind Klein, says it's the only significant rain forecast for the whole of July.
It is good that it is raining today, but in order to bring the dam levels back up to a normal level, we would need the normal rainfall of this time of year plus extra rain to make up the deficit.
Rosalind Klein says Aucklanders must continue to be careful with their water this winter. Heavy rain warnings have been issued for Rotorua, the Gisborne Ranges, Hawke's Bay and Taupo tonight. The Selwyn District Council is collecting plastic bags from local businesses to make sure they get recycled and not dumped. Single-use plastic bags have been banned throughout the country since Monday. The council says it will send the unused leftover bags to a recycling plant for processing. Retailers and charity shops in the district can hand them in until August the 2nd. It's 6 minutes past 6. The Crusaders have gone for youth over experience, naming Mitchell Dunshay in place of injured All Black lock Scott Barrett in the starting lineup for Saturday's Super Rugby final against the Waguares in Christchurch. Barrett is out for 6 weeks with a broken finger, and fellow All Black Ryan Crotty is out for even longer. So Jack Goodhue will start at second five, with Braden Enor coming in at centre. Given he could have called on Luke Romano, Dunshay is a surprise choice by coach Scott Robertson.
Mitch has played a lot more rugby recently, and every time Mitch Dunshay's played, he's been exceptional for us, and we think he'll suit the style that the Hugwed is. Luke's an exceptional closer or finisher, very experienced, so we've gone for his experience to finish.
Scott Robertson. New Zealand expect fast bowler Lockie Ferguson to be fit for next Tuesday's likely Cricket World Cup semi-final after missing him in today's final pool game lost to England. The Black Caps will almost certainly play Australia. It was Ferguson who accounted for David Warner and Steve Smith in the pool game against Australia, and captain Kane Williamson knows how important he is.
He's been outstanding throughout this whole tournament and a real point of difference for us in terms of coming in and bowling at 150. Did we miss him? Yes, he's been so successful in the last 8 games, but potentially would miss him more if we didn't have him, hopefully in another game's time.
Ferguson sits second equal on the tournament's wicket-taking list. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Our Changing World presents an astronomer's guide to Matariki. Rachel Church debuts as our latest cultural ambassador, getting us to the heart of some of the world's greatest classical music. This evening we're all at sea with Debussy, and former Country Life presenter Susan Murray joins us from Mount Isa, deep in the heart of the Australian outback, on Nights with me, Brian Crump, from afternoon news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow for Northland to Waitomo, Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taumaranui. Rain with heavy falls, possible downpours, easing to a few showers tonight and clearing tomorrow evening. Taranaki to Manawatu, also Taihape, Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. Periods of rain with heavy falls in Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Taihape, easing to showers tomorrow. Snow lowering to 700 metres in Hawke's Bay and Central Plateau overnight, affecting high-level roads. For Horowhenua to Wellington and Wairarapa, occasional showers. Nelson, Buller and Westland fine, high cloud in Nelson clearing tonight. Canterbury and Marlborough showers developing this evening, then clearing from inland Canterbury later tomorrow. Southland, Otago and Fiordland fine spells and a few showers mainly about the south coast, becoming fine north of Dunedin tomorrow. Chatham Islands, periods of rain developing from this evening, heavy falls tomorrow morning. You're with RNZ National and it's 9 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. New Zealand's second largest dairy cooperative is headed into Chinese hands, leaving a sour taste in the mouths of many shareholders. West Coast dairy farmers have overwhelmingly voted to sell the 150-year-old Westland Milk products to Yearly. After years of low payouts and mounting debt, the board recommended they accept the $588 million offer, which is subject to approval from the Overseas Investment Office. Now, Westland Milk Chairman Pete Morrison spoke to our reporter Maya Burry in Greymouth this afternoon after that vote.
94% of farmers voted in favour of this. They're fully 100% behind it.
But they also felt that they had no other option going forward.
Well, they didn't. Absolutely, they need a competitive milk payout. You know, that's what we all need as farmers. We want to own our farms and we want to own our cows, and they needed that, and that's what they've got.
And that was Pete Morrison. Now, Graham Nayland, who refers to himself as a long-suffering shareholder of Westland Milk, voted against the sale and joins us now on the phone. Hi, Graham. Why did you vote no?
I guess it was just a symbolic vote against and a bit of my own requiem for the unnecessary death, I guess, of what was a great West Coast and New Zealand company. And it was particularly galling for me that will now be foreign-owned rather than a New Zealand cooperative.
So you knew that you were going to be in the minority voice here?
Oh, absolutely. I knew right from the day that the sale was first proposed that there was no way it was not going to be voted for.
So how much pressure were farmers feeling to get this through?
Oh, I think a lot of pressure. I mean, you know, from their own banks, as well as you know, the pressure of the low payout over the last few years has induced up and down the coast.
So were they, a lot of them, financially against the wall? No other choice?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, you know, the word on the street is that, you know, over 30% of the farmers were in a precarious position, I guess, with their banks.
So whose fault is it that it ended up this way?
Oh, well, I guess in terms of whose fault it is, you know, if you listen to what Rod Oram said, it was the fault of the very conservative board way back in 2001 when the restructuring came in and we decided to remain independent and didn't set a share price that reflected the fair value for entry and exit that the Fonterra shareholders got. So, you know, right from then, but I guess more recently it's been a string of directors and chairmen and CEOs that have taken what was once a cash-rich company down to a cash-strapped and virtually broke company.
Yeah, so as you point out, this did not happen overnight. So how much of a fight did you and the other shareholders put up over the years to get this turned around?
Well, personally, I think I was the only shareholder in the West Coast that actually put a submission into the Select Committee when the Restructuring Act went in 2001. And in fact, I went up and personally appeared before the committee, virtually begging them to give us the share value that the Fonterra shareholders were going to get. And I felt that, you know, without that we were in a precarious position. I also voted against going independent, and at the time that we went independent, unless we adopted the model that Tatua have adopted, where they actually ring-fenced the supply and said, let's look after this supply and not let anybody else in. And I've been pretty vocal for the last 19 years and trying to get that share price lifted to a level where, the new people coming in didn't ride on the backs of those people that have been here for a while and have had years and years of retentions in their payout.
So
I feel I've done my part. I even went to the trouble of standing for board of directors against the then chairman, Ian Robb. So I feel
you've gone down fighting.
My duty as a shareholder.
Yeah. So the chairman, Pete Morrison, reckons it's a good day on the coast. Is he right?
Well, I guess if you look at a company that's virtually on its knees and the independent valuation was 88 cents to $1.38, you'd have to say, yes, $3.41 is a good day for the coast. But I guess when you look deeper into it and how we got from a company, when this idea was first floated, the directors were talking about a value of somewhere between $6 and $7 a share. And then to end up with $3.41 is a bit of a gut-wrenching thing. But in terms of, where the independent value is, I guess, you'd have to agree with Pete that it is a good day in that respect.
But you can only spend the money once, yeah? And on average, farmers, I think the estimate is that you'll get $500,000 on average each. It sounds like a lot of money, but how far is that going to go?
Well, for some people who are heavily indebted, it's going to go, quite far in terms of restoring some equity in their property, I guess, if they repay that debt. Certainly the banks that they bank with will be, feeling a lot easier if that money is put in and the debt reduction takes place.
So do you think that this could potentially be the beginning of the end for dairy on the West Coast?
It's hard to say, really, whether it will. I think dairying will probably be always here, but in what form it will be, I guess it's anybody's guess now. It's out of our control.
Do you mentioned the fact that you were opposed to it going into foreign ownership. So would have you been happy, as you can be, for it to be sold as long as it wasn't offshore?
I would have been happier. Obviously, I'm not happy that it's been sold because, we've had all of those years of retention where we've invested in plant so that one day we would reap the rewards of those investments, and now that reward's going to go to an independent owner who they've paid a price for coming in. I don't think that it's a fair reflection of the investment that farmers have put in over the last 20 years.
There's a guarantee now for 10 years around your milk price.
Yes.
Are you convinced that these new owners are going to do right by you?
Well, I guess, they said that they will, but I guess my concern is that it's based on the farm gate milk price for Fonterra.
Yep.
And if you look at the position that Fonterra's in, they're sort of going down the same road as Westland, it would seem, and so there's a lot of retentions that are going to be needed in Fonterra. So I guess in real terms, Yili will be taking money from us in terms of retention because all they have to do is match the Fonterra price, which is going to drop anyway. The farm milk gate price is going to drop because of the retentions that are required.
Hey, appreciate you joining us this evening. That's Graham Nealon, who voted against, it was a protest vote, as he said there, against the sale of the Westland Milk Co-op. It's going into Chinese hands as long as it is signed off by the Overseas Investment Office. Now, a new report has added weight to calls for a revamp of the way the welfare system defines relationships. It's calling for immediate changes, saying the rules are kneecapping some of our poorest families, the same ones this government says it wants to help. Our social issues reporter Sarah Robson has more.
Michelle, which isn't her real name, was on the sole parent benefit when she started a new relationship. Under the current rules, people receiving that benefit must not be in a relationship in the nature of marriage, and if they are, their payments will be cut. Michelle says she was anxious about how that might apply to her situation and what it might mean for her entitlements.
If anybody found out, and what if it only lasted for a week, and then the next week, okay, well, no, it's not working, but rumours get around that you were seeing somebody, and then they'd dock it. They'd dock your pay or cut your pay or something.
And Michelle says that can put a lot of pressure on new relationships.
You're in a relationship because you see a future with somebody, but it doesn't always work out that way. And if it's been a month, I don't think that constitutes as, living like you're married.
The new report by the University of Auckland Public Policy Institute and the Child Poverty Action Group says the way relationship status is defined by the Ministry of Social Development is unclear and outdated. Work and Income's online guide for defining a relationship includes things like whether two people live together or stay overnight at each other's houses a few nights a week, whether they share responsibilities, socialise or holiday together, share the bills, money, bank accounts or credit cards, and whether people think of them as a couple. And if beneficiaries get it wrong, the consequences can be serious, leading to accusations of fraud and potentially a criminal conviction. Susan St John from the Child Poverty Action Group says the rules can put solo parents off trying to form new relationships.
Because they don't know the point at which they're going to step over the mark and suddenly find that they're not entitled to a benefit in their own right, that they've got to rely on their new partner to support both them and their children.
Susan St John says the rules could run counter to the government's goal to reduce child poverty and improve child well-being, and they need to be changed immediately.
Relationships, when they're good, are very good for children and for, obviously, the adults in the relationship. The family unit, when it works well, adds to the well-being of people within it. So we should be fostering the family unit, we should be encouraging it. Our rules are such that they penalise the development of those relationships.
The report also raised concerns about the intrusive and demeaning process people are put through when they are investigated for relationship fraud. Ricardo Menendez-March from Auckland Action Against Poverty says it's unnecessary.
Sole parents are subjected to incredibly scrutinising questions about their sex life in order to determine whether they're in a relationship or not. This ends up resulting in thousands of investigations a year to determine whether a sole parent is in a relationship or not.
This report isn't the first call for changes to relationship rules in the welfare system. The Welfare Expert Advisory Group, which was tasked by the government to look at how to overhaul the welfare system, also recommended reforms. It wanted beneficiaries to be given a 6-month grace period when they started a new relationship before any cuts were made to their payments. Michelle says changes are desperately needed.
I know so many people that are so scared of people finding out that they're dating someone when they're on a sole parent benefit because they're scared of what the repercussions are going to be. And there just needs to be a really clear what they class as a relationship.
The government has committed to only a few of the Welfare Advisory Group's recommendations so far, and a review of the relationship status of beneficiaries isn't one of them. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Sarah Robson, aho.
It's almost 21 after 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Amsterdam's mayor has announced new plans to protect prostitutes. They've long been fed up with tourists taking photos of them in the windows of the city's famous red light district. The mayor, Femke Halsema, wants to implement the biggest overhaul of the Amsterdam sex trade in 2 decades, including closing down brothels in the city centre. It's also aimed at tackling a rise in human trafficking. Here's the BBC's Jonathan Savage.
Amsterdam's first female mayor says she wants to make things safer for sex workers, and one of her ideas is to put them out of sight. Femke Halsema says social shifts such as human trafficking and increased tourism are creating dangerous and degrading environments. She's making a number of suggestions in an attempt to cut crime and revive the red light district. The options are closing, moving or cutting the number of brothels, tightening licences for women working behind the windows, or simply ending the practice of window prostitution outright.
They become brothels or closed shops where the women work. You can imagine, for instance, that people will have an app or something where you can look the women up on your telephone, but without seeing them in the windows. And it means that people who are passing cannot laugh at them anymore.
Femke Halsema says there is plenty to appreciate about the history and atmosphere of her city's red light zone, but human rights violations and misbehaviour are too high a price to pay to avoid reform. Foxy Angel, a sex worker and a member of the trade union Proud, agrees that many tourists don't know how to treat prostitutes with respect. However, she fears ending window prostitution could cause problems of its own.
Well, if they close the windows, all the sex workers will go underground. Then they need much more people to regulate that. So no, I don't think that's going to work. It's going to lead to a lot of more crime and hate against sex workers.
The Mayor's 4 scenarios will be put to locals over the next month. The most popular idea will be voted on by the City Council later this year.
That's the BBC's Jonathan Savage. A Rotorua whānau has issued a public plea for information about a pounamu which was stolen from their son's gravesite. The pounamu was custom-made for Curtis Jones, who died from cancer 4 years ago. Te Aniwa Hurahanganui reports.
For 3 years, the dark green circle-shaped taonga has sat on Curtis Jones's grave at Kauai Cemetery. His partner and family had it made for him following his death and had placed it on a plaque engraved with the words Aroha Pumo mo ake tonu atu, my deepest love forevermore. But last week they discovered it was missing. Tareen Huiero Jones says her whānau are devastated it's been taken.
My brother's gravesite is visited often, so don't really know when it could have been taken. It's not the only thing my whānau's gone through either. We've had quite a few losses in our family since 2015. So last year my auntie suddenly died and it left my cousins orphans, and then this year my nan died, and so to have this happen, it's just super overwhelming.
The whānau have contacted local pawn shops for any information and reported the missing taonga to the police 2 days ago. They've also reached out on social media, and in less than 24 hours, their post about the missing taonga has been shared more than 2,000 times.
It's been lovely. I'd like just seeing all the support. Everyone has been sharing the post. We were kind of iffy about going public with it just because it's just hard, like showing public displays of pain. So we kind of tried to sort it out ourselves at first, but it's been a while now and we just really want it back.
An expert on Māori art history from the University of Auckland, Dr. Ngarino Ellis, is warning the culprit to return it immediately, saying pounamu is extremely tapu or sacred and must be treated very carefully.
Pounamu has an innate tapu and mana to it, so anything that is made from pounamu is innately special, and if a taonga at any time is removed deliberately, that tapu has been desecrated. The person needs to return that as soon as possible to reset that balance.
And she says there could be serious consequences for those involved if the pounamu isn't returned.
When things are taken, taonga are taken, people can get very, very sick, and maybe not them, but it might be members of their family. Some people say things like the ancestors will get them, so it's nothing to be taken lightly.
Curtis Jones was 29 when he died. Tareen says though the taonga is missing for now, the memory of her brother will always remain.
He was, him along with my dad and both my kolo, they're like the epitome of what men should be, like the best male role models that I've ever come across.
The police have no active lines of inquiry, but urge anyone to come forward with information. For Checkpoint, I'm Te Aniwa Hurihanganui.
A Russian man has given a new meaning to the term shotgun wedding after arranging for his fiancée to be held up by what appeared to be a team of heavily armed Special Forces soldiers, head and hands at this point. This is from the Can You Believe It file. The terrified woman was dragged out of a car in a mock arrest, but it was her partner who was hoping for a life sentence after he then appeared on bended knee to pop the question. The BBC's Steve Rosenberg has the details.
If you're planning a marriage proposal, I suppose you could be traditional and do it with flowers. Or you could try the Russian way. 2 lovebirds are dragged from their car at gunpoint by men dressed as Russian special forces. Automatic weapons aimed at their heads, they are forced to spread their arms across the bonnet. It is a violent and terrifying scene, but it turns out it's only a joke. paid for by the male victim. Eventually, he goes down on one knee, whips out a ring and asks his terror-stricken girlfriend to marry him. She's delighted, I think. In Russia, extreme marriage proposals are all the rage. Hiring the heavies, some of them ex-security services, will set you back around £300. Alexander from Penza told me how he'd popped the question. I wanted a marriage proposal with a bit of a spark to it, he told me, so I organised a pretend business meeting. There was a police raid, there were guns and handcuffs. My girlfriend got detained. She burst into tears. But when I proposed marriage, they were tears of joy, and she said yes. Clearly, the kind of proposal she just couldn't refuse.
Oh, yeah, you could. You could refuse that. That is Steve Rosenberg in Moscow. Just a quick bit of feedback before we head off about parking on the berms and the potential for that to be banned. This person says, read the woman who wants cars off berms. If you expect me to shore up council coffers by covering the cost of maintaining it, then it's not a big ask to let me park on it. I'll take my car off the berm, this person says, when the council starts mowing it. Hey, let's also talk quickly about Air New Zealand cutting newspapers in its lounges on the grounds of sustainability. Peter's got in touch, said, I would believe Air New Zealand if they removed those dreary flight magazines at the same time. And this one, what an irony it is that Air New Zealand bans newspapers in its lounges and burns millions of litres of avgas per year, polluting our precious airspace. Pete from Otaki says. Hey, thank you all for your feedback this evening and tuning in. Don't forget, you can go online and look at some of our video stories and see all the pictures either on our Facebook page or our webpage. That's all we have time for this evening. Of course, we'll be back tomorrow. Enjoy your night.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The chairman of Westland Milk is hailing today's vote to sell it to a Chinese conglomerate as a good day. Regional tourism organisations have backed the idea of a bed tax to support councils facing mounting pressure from growing visitor numbers. Today's heavy rain won't alleviate water shortages in Auckland's Waitakere Dam, and a US federal judge has temporarily blocked the state of Ohio's so-called heartbeat bill, which bans abortions as early as 6 weeks into a pregnancy. Our next news at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
They will bully the person, they will confuse them, they will shame them, they'll do things to smash their credibility.
Lately with me, Karen Hay, is your late night eye on the latest headlines and the people who are making them.
Juries don't like watching beat up. That can have a negative effect, and I think most lawyers know that.
Live with local, national and international stories as they happen.
63% of